All right, we are live. Very exciting. Welcome, everybody. This is Kabarza from Flux. We are going to build Netflix.com today. So, everybody in the chat, please let me know, where are you from? Hey, Simone, how are you doing? Webflow's new logo looks very familiar. Yeah. From Spain, India. Really cool. I'm based in Germany, by the way, from Finland, South Africa, UK. So from all around the world. Really exciting. This is super exciting, everybody. As you know, this is my first live video here on the channel. And we're going to build Netflix.com. The assets are in the description. So if you want to build alongside with me, you can find the style guide and also the Figma file. So the style guide is for the starting point, and the Figma file just to copy the text and the assets over. We'll do everything step by step together. If you want to build alongside with me, just feel free to do so. Francesco from Italy. How are you doing, Francesco? This is super exciting. Okay, everybody. So let's have a look at what we have here on our Figma file. So again, you can find the link to the file in the description. And if you open the file, I'll see all your cursors here moving around. So I just put a screenshot to see this as a reference, but also we have the elements built here. So we can grab whatever we need to start building. Figma is not available. Okay, I will check that in a second. Sorry guys, if there is a technical problem, it's because the first one, things can go like this. To me it says it's available. Share. Everybody can view. Only people invited to everybody with the link. So now you should be able to see it right. That was my bad. Sorry about that, guys. Now I see you. All right, let me now start sharing my screen. Awesome. Now, this is super exciting, and we have 12, so with me 13 people already in the file. Just it's super fun. I think you can also mess with the design. I remember I didn't give edit access, but apparently everybody can edit. Okay, I'm going to set it to view so we won't have everything messed up. All right. So now that you also see my screen, let me give you an overview of what we will be building. We want to make the hero section and also one of the or two of these sections, maybe not the other two. Let's see how with the time goes. Then I want to also recreate this frequently asked questions section. So you see how animations work. And also at the end of the video, if we make it, we can also start adding some animation to the, like spice it up, maybe add a different section and animate a couple things here and there. I see some people with having blocks here. So please, let's not mess around with the document and let's start building. By the way, you should also have access to the link to get the style guide. What we have in the style guide is just a style guide page next to the home page. and this is what we will start doing. So coming back to the design, I think I need to remove some axis, just some axis, because some people can edit and it's just changing things way too many often. This is my bad, sorry guys about this. I should have. Okay, thank you, Anna. Anna will take care of it. By the way, Anna is also here. She will be helping me from the Flux team with everything regarding, I don't know if you have, yeah, I have this email. It's the wrong one. Let's just move on. I think we are fine for now. Let's start building. So starting with the style guide, why do we want to use a style guide? Because there are so many styles that we will use again and again that we want to we want to set them at the beginning. So let me also change something here. Just a second. For the Figma file. All right, now I have it. So let's talk about the style guide. We have things like headings, paragraphs, maybe backgrounds, things that we have throughout the project over and over. So we want to style them in one place and then reuse those styles later, right? That's why we want to use a style guide. And for that, I'm just going to use the style guide we have here at Flux, which you can also duplicate for yourself. Going back to the project, the style guide, you find it, you find the style guide in the style guide page. And here, let's start with the first thing, which is the background. So looking at the design, we see a black background everywhere. So we can assume that the rest of the project, we need a background which is black. We don't want to set each section separately to be black or just one page. We can do it from the style guide and or from other pages too, but we can say body all pages. We can click here on the selector and start styling. For that, we want the background to be black. But before doing that, maybe I should make it gray so we see the rest of the style guide, because we want to also change the color of the text. So the color of the text, all H1 headings will be white. The paragraphs that we have also will be white. So we go to all paragraphs. This is an HTML tag, so which will this will set a default style on the HTML tag, which will be applied to the rest of the elements by default again. Then we have H2s, H3s, and I will go through them and change those as well. So just going through each, all H2 headings, set them to white. The same here. And for the rest of them. I'm not sure if we will need to change, if we will add any H5, but we can set that too. But I don't think for this specific build we will need that. Then the color palette. Let's go back here. We have this very red from Netflix. So it's a Netflix red. We can copy the style. If I can copy it, I can't. Okay, let's copy it like this. We can copy the hex code and then bring it to the style guide. Maybe now that we already have black, we keep that as black. We can come here and change that, edit it. This is a color swatch, which we can reuse in the rest of the project. Here we can change that to be that hex color. And that's our very red. Yes, that's a name. Very red. I don't know, which other color do we have here? Probably nothing else. Well, we have also this gray. We can also use that in the color swatch. So again, another color swatch. I'm going to edit it. We could also delete and create a new one, but I'm going to edit this one, paste the hex code, and also call this gray. So this would be Netflix gray. All right. So you see, we already have the style guide sort of working. Not every thing is set up. I don't know if we need all of this. We can always come back to it and then add more or change stuff, or we can change them directly from the homepage. Should I make the flow? So the Webflow build will it be available after the stream? Well, let's do it. So we can do that definitely. Let's make it available after the stream, and you can all go either a read-only link or a clonable, which you can clone and edit on further. So let's continue here with the style guide. I'm going to add color to this style title as well, because otherwise we won't able to see it when I change everything to black. So I'm going to change that also to be white. And even for the colors, I did something probably not, I could have, instead of just choosing the color, choose one of these color swatches, which would have been better. I didn't do that. So yeah, that's something I should have done. There is no big penalty here because it's just an example build, and the color of the text probably won't be any different. But yeah, if we set it to be a color swatch, we can edit it much easier later. Let's go back to the home page and maybe start building. So let me go back to the, every time I'm coming here, I'm just hoping that everything is in the same place and it's not, you know, completely destroyed because of the all the access. But okay, I see everything is in place, and great. Here we can, in the Netflix, in the Figma file, we can start exporting files. This is the first step I would do for each project. After setting up the style guide, I start exporting the assets. For example, here we have this background picture. Sometimes I tend to bring this the assets out of the main frame because I want to see them also out of the frame, because I'm going to export them just alone, not in the frame. So I want to see if there is any edit that I have to do, or if it's an PNG or a JPEG, depending on, you know, the design, which we'll get into in a second. So for this one, we can imagine this is pretty straightforward. This is just a JPEG. We can here choose JPEG, and because this is going to be the background of our hero section, we probably want to export this at 2x. So this would be 2x of the resolution. So we have it with a better quality on Retina displays. But in this case, I actually have everything already exported. But I will go, I can go through everything together with you, but I will, let's do it together so you see it also. So here, just press export at 2x, and it's actually that simple. We have it now, and we can add it to the, we can add it here to the asset panel, right? So with that, we can start building the hero section. Now that we are on the home page, let's go back to the body all pages. If you remember, I set it to this gray because at that time I want to see the rest of the page, the rest of the elements. But now it's time we can actually set it to black. So now we have every pages on our project black. The background will be black by default. And if we want, we can change that for any specific other section. So starting with sections, what I do here normally, I normally just use keyboard shortcuts. So press Control E. I believe it's Command E on if you use Mac. I'm still one of the designers remaining on Windows. So I press Control E and then I can search for a div block. Another way to do that is if you are a beginner just starting up with Webflow, you can come to the navigator and then press this button to add a new element, and then you have a variety of different elements. A lot of people start with section, but a section just looks different. So what does it mean? What do I mean when I say it looks different? So if I edit and then add a div block, the div block went in. So this is a section, this is a div block, and the icon looks different here, but these are actually the same. It's just Webflow saying this is a section, and if you want to just have a better overview and see it, you can use this one. But there are also some constraints. For example, you can't put two sections inside of each other. You can't nest them. That's why I just use a simple normal div block, and we can start with this and call it hero section. We want to give it a class, and that could be hero section. You see, if I press the selector, there are already existing classes coming up because we are not starting from the absolute zero. We are starting from the style guide that we cloned. So that's why you see these classes, but we still need a hero section. I'm going to use camel case naming just to make it more clear for the stream, but normally this is not how I would build end client websites, but for the matter of the stream, we can keep it very clean and simple and also readable. So hero section. This is hero. So just looking at the chat for a second, seeing if there is any. Oh, I'm so fast. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I'm really fast. Thank you for mentioning it. Some people are asking, are you sure that Netflix won't mind if we rewind their homepage? I think it's fine because we are doing this for education purpose, and we are not trying to, create another Netflix. It's just their homepage for education purposes. Exactly. Just tell me, guys, if I'm really fast, if there is something that is not clear, please just let me know in the chat. I will be looking at the chat too. So I don't know, I can explain it again, I guess. Okay, great. So now we have our main first section. That's a hero section. What is a hero section, by the way? If you don't know, this is the hero section. So this area, we call this hero section. And we start by putting all of our elements here in that div block, and then we start from there. So adding that, now we need to add a background to it. What is the background? The background is the image that we already added, and it's a pretty straightforward and simple one. So we come here to the background, and then we can add the background. So choose an image. This is the image that we want to use at 2x, and we can also set it to cover. We don't see it though. Why? Because we didn't set any height for our hero section. For that, we can say here, we can do multiple things. We can set a fixed height or say a minimum height. That's what I would do here. I would say a minimum height of 700 pixels maybe. And that brings us to here. I see that the image quality is actually not that great. So I'm trying to see if I make it contain and not tile. This is not great, the quality, and this is because of the quality of this image is not super amazing, but we can still continue with that. Just something so you know, the quality is not super good. Another thing I can do, I can try to download this image from Netflix directly. So by inspecting, I'm just coming here and inspecting the website, the homepage from Netflix, and where I right click, it will be also shown here. So I can here search for the image, and I see there are multiple versions with different resolutions probably. Well, they are actually the same in this case, but we can open it in a new page, and then I see already this is much in much higher quality. Asking if we can use min height of 100 VH or 90 VH. We'll get to it in a second. Yeah, good question. Good question. So let me just swap this image because the quality is so bad. I didn't notice this from the Figma file. So just coming here and then choosing another image, the new one that we added. But now I see already this is in much better quality. Back to the question, if we can use a min height of 100 VH. So what is 100 VH? When we say 100 VH, we say 100% of viewport height. So the viewport is the amount of window space we have within the browser. And when we say 100 VH, we say 100% of that viewport available. So it's not related to the parent or the body, it's just the whole viewport size available in the browser. We can definitely do that. And if I do that, it will be always it will take all the space in the window I have, but we don't have that on netflix.com. So if we go to netflix.com and if we zoom in and out, I'm doing this to this is kind of like having a bigger or smaller or different resolution screen with the zooming in and out, and I see that it scales, and this tells me that it's not a fixed height. You know, like if it were 100 VH, it would always fill the whole space, but it is not taking the whole space. It is just this much space. So let's not lose much more time and actually start getting the build done. All right, so we have this hero section with the background. Now we are going to add the content here. And for that, you see that these are all constrained in the middle. How do we do that? For that, we can have the hero section and then add another div block. Again, I'm using Control E, just like the Finder. It's called the Finder, and then pressing D to find the div block and then adding it. You can also ultimately add it from here, just like that. Again, okay. So this one, we want to call this the hero container, because the hero container without the D is smaller than the rest of the containers. You see the whole content on the page is contained within these borders, except for the hero one, which is much narrower. That's why we can call it also something else, but I will go with hero contain. Contain. And now we can go back to the hero section and use display settings to put this new container in the middle, because we want that to be in the middle. So we say Flexbox, which allows us to put things in different orders or wherever we want. We want to go, for example, in this case, we can go vertical, align center, justify center. Then we have the hero container here in this center. We don't want the content to get too big. We want the content to be contained in the middle. That's why we need to set a max width, which will not allow the content inside to get any bigger. For that, we can say the max width of 800 pixels. So this is not the minimum, this is the maximum that it can get, and there is no minimum set. The minimum will be defined by the items inside of here. So what do we need to put inside? We have a heading, a paragraph, a smaller paragraph. This is slightly smaller. And also we have this form. Why is this form? We will get to it in a second, but let's start adding the elements. I also forgot that we changed this to min height of 100 VH, which is just too big. Let's change it back to 700 pixel, which we had. So now we need a heading, as I mentioned, and then beneath the heading we have a paragraph, which can be also a text block, but I would add a paragraph in this case, and then another paragraph. Let's add the content and then we start styling. So the content, I'm going to copy the text and come back here and paste it in. The same for here. If I can, now I can click on it, paste it here, and doing the same. This is kind of like the boring part of the build, I know, but yeah, it's essential to do it. So here I noticed something that we didn't set up, and that was the font. How do you set a font for one of the project for your project? You can come here and from the typography change the font, but we don't want to change the font only for this element. We want actually to have a default font for the whole project. So to do that, I'm actually going back to the selector, selecting the selector, it's called selector, and then body all pages. From here we can set up a font for all the pages we have, and for Netflix we can have something like something a bit, they have their own font, but we can do something like system UI. I would say it looks a bit more it looks a bit closer. Going back to the style guide, maybe here we need to change the font because I see that the fonts are set here. Right, so we had a problem and I fixed it, and let me explain it in a second what the problem was. But first let me get some water, and also I'll be reading some of the comments. Okay, the questions. I'm getting into the questions. Why Netflix uses pixels? I'm not sure if I said Netflix uses pixels. I just said it's probably not VH. So going back to the inspector, we can also look at here and see how they set up the classes. For example, this one. So this is that section. This is their hero section. We see, for example, their paddings is in the pixels. I don't see a height. Maybe I'm missing something, but I don't see a height. I see their font size is definitely in pixels. And yeah, why? Because pixels are the most common way of building, if I'm not, yeah, I believe pixels are the most common way of building. Some people, well, more and more developers, especially in the Webflow space, are going to use more REMs, which I think is great. But I thought for this first build would be a bit more complex to also explain that. I personally, for my client projects, I use REM most of the time, except if I'm going wizardry, then I'm going to use EMS. There will be a video also explaining that. So what was the problem we had? I changed the font, but it didn't change it for the headings. And the reason for that was, if I just go back, undo the changes. If I go to the all H1 headings, you see that we have the font set for the H1 specifically. So it wasn't inherited from the body. It was set on the H1 level, and I just pressed Alt or hold Alt on my keyboard and then clicked on this to remove the style. That's basically removing it, and it falls back to the default, which is, and then it gets orange. And when you click on the orange, it says it's getting the color from body all pages. All right. So with that being solved, we can also start actually styling the H1 a little bit more to look like what we have on Netflix, which is more of a bold font. So we can here come and say, for example, we want, it does look like 600 to me. We can do the same for, so I did this on a class. I want to do this on the all H1 tags, maybe 600, and then the H2 would be also, because I know that we are going to use H2, so I'm going to change it to maybe 500, a little bit less bold. Going back to the home, Tushar says, hello from India, welcome to the stream. So now you see that it's already changed because we set it in the style guide, so it's already bold. How do we go about making these to be align center? Just by coming to the hero container, shouldn't be container, hero container. It's just a naming just to make it clean and easy to read. We can set, instead of going to each one of these and tell them, align them to center, we can go to their parent and say, all your child have to be aligned center, except if we set these specifically to be, aligned in a different way. Now that we have this, we know that this paragraph is somehow bigger than this one. So we can either make this one smaller or make this one a little bit bigger. So I'm going to make this one a bit bigger and say, maybe give it a class, call it bold paragraph. Bold P, I'm calling it for short, but you can also type the whole thing and call it bold paragraph. For that, we can either change this to be bolder, which doesn't look good, or just increase the size. I'm going to increase the size. For this one too, I see that the size is not exactly what I want. I want this to be a little bit bigger, so maybe 60, and the height, I don't want it to be in fixed pixels. So here we can use something called unitless. So we can say 1.2 and then dash. That means whatever size we have multiplied by 1.2. So in any value it is, doesn't matter. It just calculates it for us automatically. And it's magic. Now you see that the text is really not readable all that much, and that's because we have a shadow here. We have this kind of gradient shadow coming in, and it helps with making the text more readable. And we don't have that on the on our build, which we will add in a second, and I will show you how I would go about adding that. So let's go back to the background. Here in the background section, we have an image, but we can stack them. We can stack something else on top of it. So in this case, it's not another image, it's a linear gradient. And we can have both sides to be black. And then in the middle, maybe at 50% exactly, we can reduce the opacity to be, I don't know, like I'm just eyeballing this now, so 38 sounds good. It looks more readable. You can play around with that. So what did we do? Just simply coming back to the hero section where we had the background image, we added on top of that just a linear gradient. All right, so I'm just reading the questions here. Is it possible to make a full stack Netflix clone with Webflow? The marketing side of it, yes. An MVP, probably with some code. I've been thinking about this, but to make it work, no, you need a lot more. I see more questions, so before moving on, maybe I need to answer some of them. For example, would you recommend using client first method? Yes, I actually use it myself, not for all of my projects, for some of them. I wouldn't say it's a solution for every project, and from my experience at least, it's not like super beginner friendly. You need to already feel comfortable with the navigator inside of Webflow, knowing being comfortable in general with Webflow, and then start using it. Otherwise, it might feel a bit too difficult to start with that. How to build multiple language sites in Webflow? We have plugins for Webflow. So these are snippets of code that you add from other tools. For example, we have Wiglot, and with that you can have automated multiple language sites in Webflow. All right, now that we have these questions answered, let's continue with the build. Next thing we are going to add is this form field. For that, I'm going to come to the elements panel, and here come to form, and we have here label, input, checkbox, and everything, but we just want a simple form block. And when we add this, there are already some elements, but we don't need all of these. So I'm going to start deleting the ones that we don't need. For example, we don't need the name. We don't need this email label. We need the email submit place for it though, and then we have the submit button. Now we want to start adding style to this. And how do we do that? How do you style a form block? This is pretty simple. A form block is essentially works the same way a div block works, so we can start giving it a name. For example, I just call it form, and then this one, we want this button to come to next to the form input element. To do that, we can set the parent to be Flex again. And now, just as default, Flex horizontal works. It tells the children inside of it to sit next to each other, not on top of each other. And now we can also have them center. But when I align them center, it doesn't align center. Why? Because Webflow has some default styles on some elements, not every element, but on some elements, including this one. So it's a input. So I would call it input field, or just input for short, and then delete these 10 pixel margins. Now it looks much better. In order to make them the same height, I would actually set a fixed height on both. So for the button, I could go, but before adding a style to this, I just remembered that we have a style guide and we have some buttons, and we can actually use these buttons that we have. So this is called CTA button. Let's use that class. So let's see what happens if we say CTA button. I'm typing CTA, comes up, apply it, it's already there, but we don't need this hover state. Do we have a hover state on Netflix? Yes, we do. It's a very subtle change of the colors. We will do it their way in just a second. So this CTA button, we want also to call it get started. So it would be get started. If I can type, and then the input, we can set it height maybe 50 pixels. Looks a bit too high. And this has some roundings. We want to remove that roundings and also set a height of 50 pixels. And it works pretty much like what we have on Netflix, right? But this button is kind of much bigger. So let's do that. How do we do that? Because these are all in a Flexbox, we can actually tell this input to take less space, or just give it less space by defining more space for this. For example, we can do it on CTA button, or I can add a class to it and call it form, because this is a button. That's my kind of way of thinking. I say this is a button used in a form, the form element, because we called it form, so we can call it form, and we can give it a width of, I don't know, like 20%. Let's try it. It gets bigger, but it's not as big as we wanted to get. So 30%, and we can, so now the text is kind of not centered. And it's because it was already a Flexbox. So just changing the justify to center, it sets it to center. All right. True. So why am I not using dimensions correctly? Yeah, somebody caught me. This paragraph should have been bigger. I just didn't put the exact number. I'm not trying to replicate everything pixel perfect, because I want to show the general way of going for things, and just to show you that you have the possibility to make it pixel perfect. If you want to go the extra mile, and this is something we do for client builds, for, you know, more serious builds. This is more of, I would say, educational fun build. That's why I didn't go for 100% like to be pixel perfect, but normally I would go. And yeah, true. Thank you for mentioning it. All right. So now we have this. We also, you see here, we have this email address written. What is this? This is something we can add here called placeholder. So by coming here to placeholder, when we click the input and then here, this little icon, we can change the states. So for an input, we have also placeholder as a state, and we can start adding styles to it. For example, it already has styles. It's just the placeholder was not set because I thought it's set to be white. It wasn't written. So email address, just writing it. So what I did, I just double clicked here and then it just shows up. We can also change it from here. Yes, text field settings, type is email address, and we can also say if it's required or autofocused. We just leave it as is. We don't change those. But now that we have this, we can also come back here, and the placeholder, we could actually change the color of that text. Now, in this case, we have this kind of gray, or even it feels like it's less gray. But yeah, definitely you have the chance to change it. If we make it this gray, we see that the contrast ratio gives us a fail message, because it's really not easy to read, especially with people with disabilities. So we can change that, bring it here. Webflow shows us in real time, checks the contrast ratio between the the text and what's underneath it. So AA is fine, AAA is great. So let's go for AAA. All right. Somebody is asking, because I mentioned this just briefly, can you explain in next live stream wizardry method? I didn't get it properly. For sure, this is also a good idea. This can be definitely a fun build. We can explore wizardry. I have some experience building multiple websites with it, and also half wizardry, so mixing it with other methods, definitely. So now we have the hero section built. We can actually start moving on. Do we have everything here? Yes, we don't have the menu. I didn't actually plan on building the menu, but it's pretty simple. We can get on it because I have some other fun things to show. That's why I didn't plan on building this. We want to get to the end of it to add more animations. So, but let's build these two sections. Coming back to the Figma file again, I see myself alone, maybe no, with a couple other people. Awesome. So I see some people are building alongside, or at least exploring. What do we have here? We have two columns that are constrained in a space, so they won't get too wide. And in each column, we have some content. So in this case, we have an H2, probably, I would say H2. Why? Because we have one H1 already, and we should have one and only one H1 per page. But then we can have more H2s. It's like a document outline. So this is an H2, I would say. This is an H2, the same for these. And these are more like paragraphs. And then we have this image. But if you look at the website, they have a video playing on a loop in that image. At the beginning, you might think that the image and the video are all the same. This could be all together one thing, but they did it this way probably to save some, because it can get really heavy if they would make the video this big. It would get much heavier, but this way they've saved some kilobytes. If we come to the code and just click on the image and inspect, we can see that this is just a PNG. This is pretty nice. So we can open this PNG and save it. Just save it as a PNG. And then upload it back here. So, and then we start building, and then I'll show you how I would add the video. So for the rest of it, there are multiple ways of doing that. I'm just going to add a section for now, and a div block, and call it a section, and show you how I plan to do this. So we can call this just section and not hero section, because we plan on using this section over and over again. So we can say section, and this section can also have a min height. This is what I like to do normally, so I would just give it a min height. This one could be something like 500 pixels. Looks a bit much. Maybe it's more of 550. So just again eyeballing it, but we will add more now. Something that we can do here is we add another div block inside, but what do we call it? For that, I would go back to the style guide and show you how we have it here set up. So for example, this one, we have something called my contain. So I would like to actually use that. So my contain, and inside of my contain, we also have flex column wrap. So this is a Flexbox that allows the children to wrap if there is not enough space. And then there are two flex 2 columns. Each of these are set to 50%. So these are for left and right simply, and with some paddings and some styling already on them. So I would just reuse these. Let me show you how I would do it. So section, what do we have? We want to add another div block, call it, again, what was it? My contain. And my contain is already has a style. And then inside of that, we can add another div block, call it flex. Was it flex? I already forgot it probably. No, flex column wrap. And then inside of that, we have two other div blocks, which are identical, called flex 2 column. It already shows it. And we have two of these. So you see these are next to each other. This is for the right content. This is for the left one. What do we have in left? Enjoy your TV. Yeah, everybody enjoy the live stream. I hope you are having fun or at least learning something. Please tell me and let me know. How come you have a design and still refer to Netflix website? I mean, why not? Because we have both, I would say. Then the design is kind of fixed, right? It's just a fixed thing. But what we have on Netflix, it's alive. We can play around with the code. We can see how it's done. So that's why I'm referring to the Netflix site. If we would just have a design, which is the case when we are actually building, then no, I wouldn't refer to any site. So let's add the content here. So what did we have? We had a heading. So I'm searching for heading and adding it, and then we have a paragraph. Cool. Now copying the text. Pasting it in, and I'll show you how we'll style it in a second. So now that we have that, this one is by default an H1, but again, we don't want an H1, we want an H2. And then for the paragraph, it looks good to me, except it's what we have in the design and also on the Netflix website. It's much bolder and bigger. So I would actually go on in here on all paragraphs and change that to be 20. It changes this too, and also change this to be 1.4 unitless or more. So pressing, I'm holding Alt, so these arrows show up, and then I can click on them. I can click on them, and 1.6 does look good. It does. What we see is this is more wrapped. So the text is more wrapped. We can make it hard wrap by, pressing enter, but this is not the way we should do it. We can actually set a max limit to our paragraph or to the flex column. I would say I would do it only on this paragraph. So coming here, I can define a new class and call it max 30, because I believe I would put like max width of 30 characters. Okay, that's a bit too much. Let's go with something like 30 36, and change that name to max 36, or it can be max character and then medium, or whatever. I'll just call it max 36. So we know exactly how much it is, and we can change that down the road. Let's see. So any questions? I'm just looking at the chat. I see a lot of people chatting and they're saying hi. Wireframe web design saying hi there. And also checking some of the questions that Anna gathered together. Somebody is asking, Lee Young is asking if he can open a 3-product e-commerce on Webflow. Yes, you can. Webflow e-commerce is still growing up, so it's not as feature rich as other solutions, for example Shopify, and you can also integrate Webflow design possibilities with Shopify, but I'm personally not a huge fan of Webflow e-commerce yet. I have big hopes though, so I hope they add more features. All right, let's continue with the build. We have this image that I already downloaded from the Netflix website, but we could also here and just export it. So coming back here, we want to add an image there. I had some images already uploaded, but I don't see any of them. Probably I did something, I resetted the project, so they are gone, but no worries. We can upload them again. Go back here, we have the image. Oh, we already uploaded it, so never mind. We can just add it here, just drag and drop it. And then we can download the video. So what is this video here? If we click, we see this one. It shows us the PNG, but underneath that, because we see that this remote control, it's on top of the video. Let's find the video. It's here. Is it the video? It's the video, yes. So this is the video and we can download it from here, but this is an MP4 and we can't use an MP4 in Webflow as a background in that way we want to use it. So I'm going to check my files and just add that in a second. So the videos, checking everything. All right. I believe I got it. But it's in the wrong format. Never mind. I'll download it again just in a second. So to clarify, this is a GIF, or I would actually add it as a GIF. Here I don't see this to be a GIF. It's an M4V, which I believe is an MP4 video, but I would just add it as a GIF. So just in a second, because I have it as a GIF, I would re-download it and show it to you guys. So, all right. Save it. And show it to you. So, back to my downloads. Netflix Live, here we have this as a GIF. This is a GIF, and that's the easier way of adding it to the build. So let me open the asset panel and just drag it in. Why am I using code? I'm not using code. I'm not sure if I'm still not using, I haven't used touch code yet, but I will be. I got a little confused. I was like, did I already use code? But no, but I will be adding just a little bit of code. So for this one, I don't want to touch this Flex2 column and change the class. So I'm going to add another div block and call it maybe GIF. Is it GIF or GIF, guys? GIF wrapper. Am I starting a war right now? So a GIF wrapper, that's how I'm calling it. The image inside and also adding, yes, the GIF. And you see that it comes on top of it. So how do we put this behind our screen? So to do that, we can have this GIF wrapper and set the position to be relative, and also make it to be a Flexbox, and then vertical center center. This is like my favorite thing. Flex vertical center center is the best thing ever. And then these images, we can actually leave this one as is, but I'm going just to give it a class. So this would be TV frame, and setting the width to be 100%. And this one, we can set it to position absolute. So when we set something to be position absolute, we are actually removing it from the document flow. It's kind of not taking any space in the document. That's why it's now on top of the other image. We can change the z index to be -1, and now it's suddenly going behind it. But you see it's kind of too big for what we have. For that, we can set actually the width to be something like 80%. Well, actually 80 worked pretty fine. Or maybe a little bit less. And then this is kind of just fixing it exactly where we want. Because the rest of the values are in pixel, we can actually do this also in pixel. So either with margin or with changing the absolute positioning, any of these would work. So this looks fine. And if we scale it up and down, it just scales down with the viewport. Why? Because it's based on a percentage. The parent is 50%, and the TV is 100%, and the image, which we should call it GIF. Yes, we just call it GIF, and this is 76 pixels. Now, let's change a couple things. So you see this content, it looks to me that it's growing too wide, and that's because our my contain is like our default from the clonable. It's as set as 1100. I would just go for something smaller, maybe 1040. That looks good to me. And we don't have a padding, I see. I would just add some padding to our contain. So when the page gets small, these won't be touching. Even though this flex column has some padding, I would also add some more padding to my contain, maybe 20. So I'm just holding Alt and dragging the mouse. That's why I can change both sides. Just some shortcuts thrown here in the chat. Anyone knows about Netlify hosting custom code? It's free and easy. Yes, it is. It's pretty fun. I have like multiple websites hosted there for free, but it's kind of a pain to edit. If you don't know, guys, you can export the project. So what we have here, we can export it. I'm just sharing it here. We can export it, export the code, and basically drag and drop it to netlify.com and host it there for free with SSL. But then you don't have any editing possibilities, except if you go into the code and literally start changing things, which is a pain. That's why it's for some small microsites, some small projects, it's fine. I'm getting thirsty talking so much. So okay, let's fix more things. We also see that this is in the middle. So this is centered, vertically centered. We have to do that too. So we can actually change this flex column to be also a Flexbox itself, vertical, and have it justify center. That way we have it center. Now that we have this, we are getting, like, with every step we get faster and faster. We have also these bars. Where are these bars? So I see it's on top of, depending on how you see it, it's on top of each section or on the bottom of this section. I'm going to add it on top of each of these sections. How? So coming to section, just the on the main section, and I'm going to add a border, a top border. It's just a line and 10 pixels, and I want it to be gray. That's why we have this gray bar on top. And now that we are going to duplicate, I'm just going to copy, paste this section. Now we have it here too. So now we are also replicating this part of the build. For the second one, we have the text. There is something really important coming up. This is really important, what I'm going to mention. So here we have the text on the left and then the images on the right. But here is the other way around. So how do you do that? How would you go about doing that? One way is to just grab, for example, the text and drag it below here. So it changes the direction, because now in the navigator, it comes after the image. So everything from top to bottom and also left to right. But this is not the way to do it. This is the wrong way of doing it, because of accessibility and many other reasons. Actually, we want the text is more important than the image. So we want this, even though we want this to look like it's on the right, we want it to be on a higher, in terms of hierarchy, to be higher than the image. So to do that, we can come to the parent and set a class on this, call it, so it's a combo class of reversing the columns, reversing their place with CSS. It's called let's call it reverse. And what we do is just click reverse. That's it. It just reversed them. It's just magic. And now we can continue adding content. Looking at the docs for some questions to answer. So let's have a little bit chat here and answer some of these questions. Can we just link it? I believe it's a Netlify question. Yes, technically you can do it. I don't know if Webflow would block that if you do, because then you're using a free tool. Well, the free version to have like premium features, like adding a domain. I don't know if they would block it, but technically it's possible to build your website on the free version of Webflow and then connect that to Netlify or somewhere else. Theoretically, I believe it's possible. When on mobile, the stacking order would read wrong. Yeah, we can change that. We can change that here on mobile when we stack them. So this one is correct. This one is correct too. It's because we actually have the style guide. It's by default correct, so we don't even have to change anything. So I know we haven't touched mobile responsive yet, but because we are starting from a good starting point, our style guide, it's already mobile responsive to some degree. All right, I'm trying to read more questions. What are the cost of Figma and Webflow? You can also check it. I don't know about Figma actually. Here at Flux, we have it as an education, for the team, but Webflow is about, I believe, $20 if you pay monthly for the light version, but you can start free. Do you prefer Webflow over WordPress? So this is where the war begins, right? I don't use WordPress anymore. I stopped using WordPress 1.5 years ago because I wanted to do more of complex builds, let's call it, with animations and more design freedom. And that's where WordPress stopped working for me. So can I make a Webflow site with a free account to learn the tool? Absolutely. We have many students who start just with a free account. You have 2 projects with 2 pages each, and you can do basically everything just except for editing code, for example, directly, or exporting the code. For those things, you need the paid version, but you can do you can learn 99% of the tool with a free version. And then you get also a webflow.io domain, which you can publish your work to for free again. So yes. Can you make the FAQ where it opens? Yes, this is what we do next. But first, let's change the content here. Just so it looks a bit nicer, and I'll explain a little bit about this, but maybe we won't go all the way doing it, and I'll tell you why. So again, we have an H2. The H2s do they look too big? This one is a bit zoomed. I zoomed it in so it looks nicer, but in 100%, this is how I would, wait, okay, sorry, I'm not sharing my screen. Now I'm sharing the screen. So if I zoom to 100% of the browser, this is how you see it, but this is not optimal for showing you guys. That's why I'm zooming in a bit, and that's why the type might look a bit too big, but it's fine. So I'm just adding the rest of the content, and so we can also go and add this part. Should we do it, or should we save time to do some of more fun animation? So let me just explain how I would do this. So the background is one image. This is as the way you see it here on the Figma file too, just one image. But then this can be also another div block with an image in it, and then these text on top of each other. And this one is actually an animation. So it's an animation set on loop. It plays constantly. This could be a Lottie file, so, or a GIF again. Doesn't matter really for this small thing, but a Lottie file will look just more smooth and would be light weight. If you don't know what a Lottie file is, you can check for lottiefiles.com. It's an awesome technology and it's supported by Webflow. And we will talk about this in detail in future streams. Maybe building, even creating some Lottie files ourselves and not just using them. So let's keep this one the way it is and continue with the build, because I want to show you some more important things. So having this section, I just copy and paste it again. And then for this one, we can actually go to this part and frequently ask questions. So I'm kind of ignoring these two sections because it's basically the same, just with a different content. And I'm sure you don't want to sit and watch me just swapping content. So let's build more important things. Frequently asked questions. What is special about this one? So we see it looks like it's as wide as the hero section, but maybe, so if I look at it, it's 815 and this is 900. So no, it's a bit smaller. So let's make a container for this just alone for FAQs. So this is basically duplicated content, which I'm going to delete. We have the flex wrap, we delete that too. We have my contain, and that's where we, again, Control E to add a div, and then we can press Control Enter to come to selector and type a class name. What do we want? We want the FAQ wrapper. So FAQ wrapper. And in the FAQ wrapper, what do we have? For this one, for example, it's better to look at the Netflix site itself than, and not the Figma, because we can interact with it. So we have this hero section, and then we have the heading, not hero section, but this header. And then these are the titles and then the answers to the question. So let's build it. What we need here inside of the wrapper, we can add a heading. Again, this is an H2. And we can actually tell the FAQ wrapper to have the text in the center aligned. And then under this, we are going to have our first div block for the FAQ and also the animations. So let's call each of these instances. So for this, we can also look here in Netflix case, we can look how they call it. So they call it FAQ list and then FAQ list item. And these are also list elements. So we can also use something similar, and I would do it also this way. So let's delete it and add a new element and introduce you to this if you haven't used it. So in HTML, we have an element called list and list item. So anything that repeats and is in a list, we should use this because it's also much easier to navigate. This is also more accessible. You can go through them with just pressing the tab. So let's add this after the heading, and now we have this list item. And these, just don't worry about them. These are basically div blocks, just a different tag, but they behave like div block, and we can style everything about them. We can also add these dots, but we don't want them, so we style them and we change the name. We say we don't need any of these, the circles or whatever. So what do we call it? We also call it FAQ list item, and the parent is FAQ list. FAQ list. So, and there are also some stylings already from Webflow, so we can remove these. For example, padding 40 on the left. We don't need that. Let's keep this 10 or it actually doesn't matter. We can also remove that and delete these two. So there are some questions regarding the list. So a list, this is an HTML tag. So looking at here, what do we have? We have a div block, which is just a normal box. This is like the most used box, the block in any website, and it's just a box with nothing special about it. It's very general. It doesn't say anything about what's inside of it. That's a good point to start thinking about why we need a list, because a div block itself, it just says I'm a box and there is something inside me. But a list says I'm a list, I have some content, and there are other elements after, you know, each two. So that's why we can use this when we have multiple instances of the same thing repeating one after another. For example, another example would be apple.com. If we come here and look at the footer, so we have shop and learn, for example, just as an example, and then they have store, Mac, iPad, iPhone, and so on. And these are lists. I believe the last time I checked, these were lists. So again, yes, they are lists. So we see this li. This is the tag, the HTML tag for list, and it just says that we have a list of these, and it's also more accessible than div blocks. That's why we can use them, and they are no different from normal div blocks when it comes to our abilities for styling them. We can add anything we want in them. So having this one, this would be, so what will go inside of this? The whole content. So this part, the question and the answer and everything, that the whole card would go into each list. That's why we need a div block for the top side and a div block for the bottom side. For that, I'm going to add two div blocks. Div blocks. So a div block here, and let's call it, we can call it question wrapper or heading wrapper, doesn't matter. So I'm calling it head wrap, and then duplicate it, just Control-C, Control-V, and then duplicate the class and call this one content wrap. Just let's call them so they are the same, wrapper. So this is the head wrapper and this is the content wrapper. And now we can start styling them and adding content. What do we have in the head wrapper? We have a question, which can be a heading. We can also look at what they have. So what element do they use for the actual question? This is just a text. So this is nothing special, but just a text element. I thought this, because this is an H2, this could be an H3 or even H4. And I would say in many, client case projects, it would be better if this were an a heading, because I know ways that you can pull this to Google and then have, a list of, when you search for something and it comes up in Google, it's easier to add them there and it's more clear. That's why I would actually use a heading, but it's a text, so I'm going for a heading anyway. Call it, this would be an H3, and the heading, what does it say? What is Netflix? Good question. And because it's not styled properly, we probably forgot to style an H3. So that's why I'm just doing it here. Doesn't matter actually. And removing the style, the weight from the font, so it the normal font is bigger. And maybe because this is the only place we use this one, so we can say 26 regular, can say 26, but normal does look a bit, yeah, this looks good. So let's give the box the color that it has, this gray color, so we see what we are doing actually. I should have done this earlier. So we give it a background color. In the background, we can give it a color, and what color? This is the color. Or maybe it's too light. Yes, it is too light. We added this. Yes, we have it. This is the right color. And now we can start adding the rest. What is this item? The way this we have it in Figma, it's actually an SVG. This is an SVG. We can export it as an SVG, or we can actually build it in Webflow. I would like to build this in Webflow. So I'm adding a div block, calling this the icon wrap, okay, because it's an icon, and then I add 2 div blocks to it. We want to make our own icon. So the icon wrapper would be again a Flexbox, and then my favorite, vertical, align, center, justify, center. We have everything in the middle, and then this one is going to be like 2 pixel, no, like 20 pixels wide. Probably not enough, maybe 25. We'll see, just a second. And then 2 pixels high, and then a background color of white. And we can call it, so icon line, right? We can call it icon line, and we have that line, and then we give it to this one too, icon line. But the second one is basically 90 degrees, turn 90 degrees. So we can give it a combo class of 2 or second. 2 just is fine. And then we can transform it, rotate it 90 degrees. You see it's happening? 90 degrees. And we need to adjust 2 pixels because I know it's such a small things. We need to adjust the 2 pixels because it's 2 pixel. No, actually it's 1. And it's because of its height, so it does look like a plus. All right, now the content, the wrapper itself, the icon wrapper, we need to give it a width of, let's say, 30 pixels by 30 pixels, or maybe 40 by 40. This looks better. And these are now what is Netflix is on top of this. How do we put them next to each other? We can come to the head wrapper and say we want display flex, and then the direction horizontal is correct. We want them to be aligned center, but also space either around or between. So between is too close, so space them around, and also add some paddings. So I would say 24, just eyeballing it. Now this looks off center because again it has some auto margin on it. We can remove these. We can set this to 0 and this to 0. Now it's fine. Looks too thin because we need to give it some inner padding either, or we can give it a fixed height. So both would work. I'm just giving it a fixed height of 70 pixels. And the way I did it, here comes another shortcut, is I'm holding Alt to have these icons. So when I hold Alt, I see these icons, and then I hold Shift with it, because if I just hold Alt and start clicking, it moves one, just increases one, but then if I hold Shift with it, it goes in 10 steps. So another small tip to be a little bit faster. All right, we have the upper part. Now we need the content part. The content has the same color. So again, background color, the same. We have a space in between them. You see this space. I'm going to add that right now. So maybe the header has a little bit of margin. Looks like 5 pixels or even less at the beginning. So let's go with 2 pixels. What is the content inside? It's a link here in this case and some text. We just copy it, and I'm not going to add the link, or let's add it. Never mind. I'm going to add a paragraph. Change it to another keyboard. Okay, a language that is supported here. And then change the content. Now we see the link is by default red. Why? Because our style guide changed it to red when we changed the colors. So we can come here. Actually, this is a link. And then all links, we can say their normal color, default color is white. So somebody is asking, using fixed height is bad because it looks awkward when the text wraps. This is true. This is true. It depends. In this case, we don't have text to wrap in the heading, but this is very true, and it's not for here, because for the content wrapper, this is what I was about to mention, we are not going to use a fixed height. Let me add some padding here, and then I'll get back to that in a second. So let's give it like 24 padding on all sides, holding Shift and dragging. And I want the text to be just left aligned. And the link, all links, I want their hover to not disappear, to just maybe turn a little bit gray. So when we hover, the link turns just a little bit gray. We also see that the content here is in a much smaller container. We can also do that. So maybe on my contain, we could actually give it a second class and say FAQ section. Or any other name, and instead of being max at 1040 to be like, I don't know, like 800, we said it was around 800, and add a bit more padding here, maybe even like something like 42. Looks good, but then we have to also add it here. So let me go back to this. Never mind, just change it back the way it is. It looks fine. Back to this question. I set this to height 70 pixels, and if it's if we should use another option. So why is this a problem? Let's just show it, because that's why we are here. If I would go and paste this, look, when I have a very long title, if I have a very long title, it looks weird because we don't have enough padding on the top and the bottom. So to fix that, we can actually add the padding on all sides here, 24. And instead of having the fixed height, have just the padding. So that way, if the text wraps, then it's fine. So let's keep it that way. It looks a bit chunkier, but we can adjust it here, maybe 18. All right, let's have it this way and start animating. But before animating, maybe start another, add another one. So here's another one with the same content. Maybe we can add content here, so it's not boring, and also it's not just bottom margin, it can be also top margin. Just 2 pixels top margin, 2, and let's start animating. So what is happening? What is happening when we animate this? Let's have a look at the chat and the questions, and if there is nothing specific about the layout, we can go on and animate this. So if I open the first one, and this is the question, if I open the first one and open then another one, the first one gets closed. There are 2 ways to do this. One of them is code, which I know many of you don't like. Another way is to actually use a different element. So that element is dropdown. I know it's this is something that I'm planning to make a video about. I'm trying to figure out if it's the best way of doing this or not in terms of accessibility, because I don't know if this drop-down element is made for that. It's made for menu. So what is drop-down? If I come to here, this is a drop-down. This is a drop-down, and if I click any of these, it closes itself back. Changed it to German. That's not what I wanted to do. Anyway, it closes back. So you could actually use that element, that drop-down element, not just in the nav bar, anywhere else too. And if you close one of those, it will. If you open the second one, it will close the first one. So it works. It works without code, but you need to use drop-down, and I'm just not sure about if it's about accessibility. I'll figure that out, and if it's a good and accessible way of doing so, I will make a video about it. All right. Any other question? Do you use a specific class naming convention? Very good question. For this project, nothing too specific. I'm basically using something that we teach for beginners, and also something that Webflow has officially. That's also how they name classes in their template marketplace, because it's simple, it's easy to read, and it's beginner friendly. But personally, I do use client first, and I also use wizardry. These are not well, the first one is a class naming convention, but wizardry is more of a technique. But yeah, and I use also BEM sometimes, BEM naming. So yeah, depending on the project, I would say. Just looking at more questions. So do I use any plugin to see the TV SVG? This is a good question. No, no, I'm actually not using any specific plugins here. I just use Chrome and then inspect, and there is just like one fun, small little detail about it. Where you click, it shows it, it highlights it for you. So if you're looking for a specific element, make sure that you're clicking on that element and it just highlights it for you, and then you see it. Then I just double clicked here, can click here and open the SVG from the TV. It's the same for every other element as well. So I hope I'm not pronouncing the name wrong. That's why I'm not using names as often, because I'm afraid of pronouncing them wrong. But why am I using code? Webflow was code free. Webflow is code free, but you can always utilize some code to do more. And even with Webflow, we are writing code, but just in a visual way. So it's pretty important to understand what we are doing, to know the code that we are creating. So that's why I'm mentioning this is a list item, this is a paragraph, this is a heading. And we use these are things, HTML tags, and these are important for accessibility, for building great websites, and we need to learn them. But we don't have to learn them when we just start learning Webflow. That's the great thing about Webflow. We can just start building and pick, code and learn that while we learn, while we improve. We can still make amazing websites without any code. And can this website be built without code? Yes. The whole Netflix website, this can be built absolutely with no code. So yes, no problem. All right. Now let's make this animation. What is happening in this animation? When we click on the question, the content shows up. When we click it again, it closes down. And there is something to note here. Something important is no matter how long the content is, it always shows up like the whole height. So this is, I will show you how we do that. And also it spins this icon. So it's from a plus, it changes to an X. So let's do that. To do that, if you haven't done any animations in Webflow, that's where I want to mention. We have triggers that will, when we click or we hover, based on however we set them, that will trigger an animation. But there is a very fundamental and important things to know here is the trigger doesn't need to be animated itself. We can use a trigger like a button to animate something else, another element. So here we are actually clicking on the question, but we are triggering the content. We are closing and opening the content. So with that being said, I click on the head wrapper and then go to the animation, which is here, animation and interactions panel. And then we want an element trigger. Why? Because it's an element triggering the animation. What is it? We have a long list here. Mouse hover, mouse move over element, but we have a mouse click. And in the mouse click, we have first click and second click. In the first click, let's add an animation. I see we have a couple here, but let's ignore them. These are from the style guide. We create our own. So new timed animation, and we call it FAQ open. Let's name them correctly because we don't want to have a giant list of unnamed animations. What is going to happen? So if we add an action, we can animate that action. So what do we want to animate? The content wrapper. That's why I'm going to click on the content wrapper, and we are going to change its size. Specifically, its height. We are not going to change the width, we just need to change the height. But we also want to have an initial state. For some animations, we don't really need that necessarily. It depends on the animation. Here, I'm going to set it as initial. What is initial? These are closed. But you see, when I close it, I still see the text. Why? Because I forgot to do something, and it's just a small touch. So we want the content wrapper to not show anything outside of its place. What's that? So it's overflow none. When we set its overflow to none, the content inside of it won't flow out when the size gets too small. So that means the content closes with the box, with the content wrapper box. Coming back to the animations, so we have it on the head wrapper, then FAQ open. Now when we open and close it, the text also closes in, but it doesn't close all the way in. This is also why I didn't add this padding at the beginning, because it creates this space that won't be closed. So how do we add padding without adding padding? The answer is by using another div block. So we add another div block here inside of content wrapper and put the text here. We can call this content, because it just has the content, and we add the padding here. How much was it? 24. And then we remove the padding from the parent. So this way, hopefully, when we close it here, so you see I'm like animating it here. We open it, we close it, but you notice it gets sometimes too high. Like we don't want it to be 500 pixels high. So how do we define how high it gets? Where is the height coming from, the max height? It's pretty simple. So we have 0 for the beginning. When the site loads, the initial state is 0. When we click, something happens. What's that? So duplicate that, and it's the height going from 0 pixels to auto. That's it. It's that simple. So auto says it depends on the content inside of it. So if we have more, it opens more. The duration, we can have it at 0. I feel like what Netflix has is too choppy and too fast. So 0.6 it is. And we can also add some easing. You can play around with the easing. It's amazing. It's like what you could do in After Effects, even I would say better, some degree. I would go just ease in quad. So in the first click, it just opens it. On the second click, we want to close it. So I'm going to duplicate this, call it FAQ close, and we don't have any initial state for closing for the second click because we already had that. So we are going from auto to 0, and maybe we can make the closing a bit faster, 0.2. Now, one thing more to do is to add that div block, the content div block that we add to the top one here too. So I'm just basically here adding another div block, putting the paragraph in it and name it content. So the same thing. Now, going back to the animation, we have these set to happen on desktop, tablet, and all the breakpoints, and it can happen on the element it's triggered on or on the class. So here we can say these are on class, and this is on element. So when we click on that, when we click on it, well, 0.6, I see it's already too much. And you see it shifts the content below because we don't have anything after this section. So I'm actually going to add just some space for no extra reason, just for because of this we can add okay, so I'm just duplicating this section, deleting everything in it. I'm just calling it space and min height of, I don't know, 100 BH, just so we have some space on the bottom side of the page, so content is not shifting all the time. But you see, we click, it opens, and it depends on the content inside of it. Let's grab like more content, this, and add it here. Now you see, no matter how long the content is, it always works. And again, if we want to set it to close the other one, we can use some code to do that, or use that element that I mentioned. Another small detail is when I hover on this, I don't know if it's clickable or not. So I can change the cursor state from auto to be pointer. So for that class, it changes the cursor state. Another piece of animation that we now need to add is the icon to spin. Going back to the animation again, now we add a rotate. The rotate is on the icon wrapper. Yes, on the icon wrapper, and at the beginning it's at 0 degrees, so initial state. Duplicating it, and when we duplicate it, we can here then animate it with the rest. What do we want it to do? We want it to spin 45 degrees. 45 degrees in 0.4 seconds. Again, this can be easy in quad. And remember, we said this animation for 0.6 was too long. It does feel too long. So let's go back to 0.4. Now looking at the animation, it spins it, but it doesn't spin it back. Why? Because we didn't set the second class, the second click. So on the second click, we are just going to spin it back. We add a rotate, change the target to be the wrapper of the icon, and we spin it back to 0. So the first click, we're changing the rotation and opening up the div block. On the second click, we're closing it again and bringing the icon to the same place as it was. So now looking at it, it works just fine. I feel like this should be a bit faster. It's because I didn't change the duration from default. And this can be something that happens when the progress is happening first, then it feels faster. So in less time, more progress happens. That's how you can imagine this. And yeah, the closing happens much faster just with the rest. All right. I think it looks good, and we can just easily add more content. But again, you don't want me probably to sit here and add more content. So if you agree, and if it's not too long, we can add a bit more spice, and it's not much. It's just a piece of animation we can do in probably 15 minutes or so. But first, let's have a look at more questions. I see a long list of questions. I'm sorry if I'm not able to address every single one, but if we do more of these, if you like, just let me know in the comments. We'll do more of these, and I will be able to answer more questions. So Anna is mentioning that I have 2 lists of questions. Okay. I have a long list of questions. So let's go to the build questions, right? So how can I add the weather and skiing videos from the resource? Do I need a plugin? I don't know exactly which videos you're referring to. I'm sorry, I'm not sure. All right, here is a very fun question. So Karigan is asking, how did I get this image to look, in this perspective? It looks like the camera is looking at it from an angle. I didn't. This is just a normal JPEG, but this is actually what we are going to do next. We want to actually make our own live version of this background. This is the spice I talked about. This is what you've been waiting for, probably. And we're going to do that in Webflow without code again, no worries. So it's happening next. Can you share that custom code for FAQ? I don't have it right now to share it, but again, if it's that urgent, you can use dropdown, and it does work. I have it, and I can show it in a second. So this is a project we are working on, and let me just show you how it works. You open one of these, and then you open another one, it closes the other one. There is no code involved here, so just as simple as that. No code involved. We are just using dropdown and just style it basically like the list. It can be a list within a dropdown too. That would be actually a good usable accessibility thing. So do you add any custom code on Webflow? If I need to, sometimes. It depends really. How was using reverse on the image and the text block was more beneficial than changing it in the navigator? Ask Anime Review. So again, these are HTML elements, and these are read from top to bottom by the browser. So first we see the things that are on the top. So if we keep the text on top of the image here in the navigator, it will be read faster, and it's more beneficial. If somebody is using a screen reader, they won't have an image without content, without any context to what it is. They see the title first, they hear the title first, the screen reader will see that first, and it's the same here, even though it's now on the right, because we used reverse with CSS, the image won't be read first. It's actually the text that will be read first anyway. All right. So I think I got the majority of the build questions. I hope. All right. Let's add the spice. I hope it's not too long, because we are already 2 hours in. I'm just going to show what we can do. Half of it is already built, so we don't have to go through the whole thing from zero. All right. So what do I want to do? This this background that we have is just a JPEG and it's not moving. And actually Netflix probably they have a good reason why they use an image and not an animation, because it's probably making the site too heavy. But anyway, this is a fun build and we are here to learn something. So I would actually approach it and build this to be animated. So it's not just a static image that can move and do a bunch of stuff. This part is more advanced. So that's why, and we don't have enough time. That's why I'm going to do it fast. So I'm going to add another div block and put it on top. So I'm not deleting this part. We can keep it. But just add another div block and call it animation section maybe. So adding animation section, and this one can also have a max height, maybe 700 pixels, and a width of 100 VW, because we want to all the time fill the whole viewport width. And we want this content to sit inside. So we can just actually copy and paste it inside here and change the section to be a vertical Flexbox. So we have that. And now we can start adding the background images. How do we add the background images? I would add them below this container because, again, the content is more important. So add a div block and call it perspective, because it's a perspective image. Thing will happen in a second. Perspective. And inside of that, we will have the background, this background, but we need a wrapper for it. So I'm going to add another div block, call it background wrap, maybe just bg wrap, background wrap. That's it. And inside of perspective, so the perspective, we want also to take the whole space available. The way we do that, well, there are several ways of doing that. We can just leave it here as position relative, and the background wrap, we can set it to be absolute. And then we say take the whole place 100% and 100%. That's scharfes S in German. The background, maybe I'm missing something that is not working. Let's add content anyway. It will start making sense in a second. So adding 100% to this, yes. So and 100% here. When we add content, it will make sense anyway. So what do we have here? We want to have a list of these images next to each other. And this is actually called marquee, these type of animation where you have a list of something and then it moves and animates. So let's do that. Let's add another div block here. Another div block here. I'm having, okay, let's just add it like this and call it marquee. And this will be our first marquee. So how will we make our marquee? I'm looking at the images we have here. So these are the images I already prepared and also downloaded, exported and downloaded. So let's start adding them. Just opening here. I'm going to grab all and add them should zoom back in. So adding all the images here, and we start adding them in the marquee we have. But in which way? We want them to sit next to each other, right? So let's add the images. We can start, for example, with this one and have it, you know, set to a fixed width and height, or we can say here high DPI, make it smaller, and it's a fixed width and height defined by the image. And then start with the next one here, for example, then a wide shot, and add it next to it, and have this next to it, and then have the same class and just have them next to each other. In order to keep all of them next to each other, I would make a Flexbox and then justify them to left, and maybe even center them in case any of them are, you know, they are not all they don't have the same height. So they would still sit in the middle, and then so on and so forth. You could just add more and more. This is the part I mentioned I wouldn't build it like completely here, because then it gets really boring to add so many images. So I'm going to add what I have already. I prepared this before, so I'm going to just paste it in. This is probably wrong, so just paste it in. Now we have them. So the reason why this is not working was because this hero section is also position static. We need to make that relative. And then this is also all right. So this is taking place, and also this is taking place. So we can have this section hero container, and this one, the perspective one, we need to make it absolute, so it goes behind it, so it's ignored kind of, and we can have the images to be high DPI actually, but because we have a size set to 100%, we don't see them, and you see them again a little bit too big. Why? Because I'm zooming in so much, so you see the icons, but on my monitor in like 100%, I would see them like this. Now we have a problem, and it's that text, we can't click it and we can't bring it forward. There's a simple solution. We just set it to relative and then a higher z-index. Probably this has a z-index already, that's why it doesn't. Yep, it has a z-index of 210. Let's put it back to 1, and now it's on top. But again, we have the same problem we had with the text not being really readable. We can fix that, and we'll fix that in a second, but I want to show you the type of animation I want to build here. So we have these images already, and I want to animate them from left to right. How do we go about this? I want to here duplicate them. In the best case scenario, we would actually have these in different images, but I don't want to, you know, sit and just change content. So let's not do that. And I'm also adding a huge margin to the top, maybe like 70 viewport. So it's pushing these down, so it's not they are not colliding together. And I'll fix the you know, the overflow problems and everything in a second, but just let's start animating first. So what do we have? We have these 3 marquees, and we want to animate them from left to right, for example. the way we set that up, we can go to the interactions, and now this time we want a page trigger. We want when the page loads and when it starts loading or when it finishes loading. In this case, it would be better if it's when finishes loading, but when it starts loading, starts faster. The animation starts loading the soon you enter the page. So let's do this one and create a new animation called marquee animation. So what do we do here? We want to take this marquee, the whole thing, and we want to move it. How? We want to move it on the z-axis, so they are animated like this, and we want to also loop it. We want it to happen in a loop, so there is no so it happens constantly. So to do that, we need to have 0 pixels at the beginning with 0 duration. I will explain it in a second why it makes sense. And then we want to duplicate that. We want this to happen in maybe 5 seconds for now, because it's fast enough for us to wait and see it. And then duplicate it again. And in a 0 second, we want to bring it back to 0 pixels. So what happens in between? So top is 0 pixels, bottom is 0 pixels, means it's in the first place that it was. In between, there will be this animation. So we will move it. By how much? This specifically depends on the way you size your images. So these are not set to viewport width. If they were, it would be easier to animate, but then they would scale with the whole page, or the padding would scale with the page and it wouldn't look nice. There are ways to go around it, but the simple solution is here. We can also animate this based on pixels. So maybe 200 pixels. I already tested that. Brings us to the same place. So why do we see this image in this again? Because in each of these, we have actually a copy. So this is the same as here. This is the same as here. So if we have, let's say, we have 10 images, the first 5 are original, and then the second 5 are the same. So we need that because when we animate, we don't want to notice where it restarts. We want to restart the animation, put it in a loop without noticing it. So we double the images. So when it comes to the same place that it originally was, then you don't notice any, the right side being black, because there is no images on the right. So it's the same. I almost dropped my water, sorry. That's why I jumped. All right, so let's put that exactly the same place as the bottom one is, to 8. So if we animate it, now we see, if we play it, we see the animation happening. And if we come here and set it to be a loop and wait 5 seconds to see if it continues. So it continues without breaking ever, right? So it works. Our animation just works. Now we want to do this for the rest of these two, but maybe on the opposite side. This one maybe on the opposite side. How do we do that? We can duplicate this by right click, duplicate this, put it together, change the target to be the second one, and again for this one, duplicate it, put them together, change the target to be the second marquee, so the second list here. And instead of going minus 2208 pixels to the on the minus side, it can go on the plus side, but then the problem is then the images, there is no images there. We need to offset for that is, and that is, we can set it at the beginning to be on the minus. So at the beginning is it's on minus 2208 pixels. So it goes the other way, right? So we just put it on the opposite and we set the offset for it. There are multiple ways of doing this, but we can do it all together here. And then duplicate the last one, put it together, and this one is also going back to the same place as the first one, which is minus. So it's the same number, essentially. We're just playing around with it in which direction we move it. Right? But there is, I probably made a mistake here. Let's see. I need to move it more, probably. So going back to the animation. So maybe this is not enough. There's another way of doing that is if we set it to be 100%, and then 2208. No, we just need to go more. I'm just reading the question. I did change the target actually. So the target, the last one, that's correct. Oh, you're completely right. Thank you. So so the math was correct. It just wasn't the right target, right? So instead of minus 100, I'll set it up in a second and then explain what happened. So let's see if it works. I forgot to change the target, but it still doesn't work. It does work, but we need to offset it, and the offset is in pixels because we move it probably too much. The second one has a different, so it goes to 0. So from minus to 0, yes, it does make sense. So one goes from 0 to minus, the other one goes the other way around. I'll explain it in a second. It does work. It's in a loop. It works. And yes, Razi, Rafi, you were correct. I forgot to select the last one. So let's make the last one, and also I'll explain it again. So reading the questions. I'm being reminded of drinking water because of talking so much. So sorry, guys. All right. So let's take a little bit time and explain what is happening here. Why is it 5 seconds starting from 0, going 5 seconds and coming back to 0? We can do this in Netflix. In Figma, the Netflix file. So the way it works, we have a rectangle here. So this is the width of our page. And we have these images. So this goes back. So we have these images. Let's just keep 3 because it's easier. We have these, and we want to move them from here to here, right? Or in the case we are doing so from here to here. Once we get to this place, we don't see anything here, right? On the right side, because the first one that we had is already out of the window. So the way we compensate for that is we have actually two set of images. So it does look like a loop. So it is a loop, but once you, this is probably better if it's smaller. So imagine we have these three in the view, and then we move them. This one goes out of the view and it comes back. It feels like it's in a circle, but it's not exactly in a circle at this point, because it's just, we are seeing the same thing, but just a copy of it. And by the time we come here to this point, we are already running out of the whole set of images. And this is the point where we make a fast reset. We make a fast reset. Just noticed where is the Witcher. Who've seen that? I have this in my list for some time. So, oh, Webflow is here. This is so awesome. Hi, I don't know who's from Webflow, but this is super cool that you are here, guys. So, here the Witcher. Just notice where is Witcher in our screen, right? This is the screen. It's like right exactly here. So when we have the whole set of images already animated to the right, the last one, which is a copy, comes back to the exact same position. And that's where we set our very fast reset. And that's that last one. So at the beginning, it starts from 0, right? 0 pixels. Then we move it whatever pixels to right or left. And then when it's done, when it's time to reset, we make a fast reset with 0 duration. So it doesn't take any time. So we bring the whole section, the whole marquee div block that was moved, we bring the whole thing back to its original place, and then it starts the loop again. So it looks like it's in an infinite loop. So for the last one, because it has the same numbers as the first one, we can have it pretty simple. We can just duplicate and just change the target. We don't have to change the numbers. We just duplicate it and change the target. Duplicate it and change the target. And now it's time to change the duration from 5 because it's super fast. We wanted to set it as 5 to see how it works. But then I would say like something like even 15 seconds would look fine. All right. Even this looks a bit too fast to me. So let's go 25. All right, this looks a bit nicer. Let's solve a couple problems and then call it the day, maybe, because it's already getting too long and I know it's pretty exhausting for you guys. I could go and build the whole thing, but I think it gets a bit too long. It's already pretty late. So one problem we have is this section. We have an overflow. We can hide it so we don't see the rest. And then we also have the same problem with the text not being readable. How do we do that? We can add another section, another div block, and call it shadow maybe. Shadow. And the shadow would be positioned absolute, taking the whole space. And now we can set our gradient on it. So gradient would be, it's behind the images. So let's put it on top of them. And then now we can set the gradient. This one is also black. You remember we did this already, right? This time just a little bit different. So now much more readable, right? Can even do it like this. Even make it darker. I know our beautiful background won't be, we can see it as good as before, but now we can read the text. Something else I would do, the whole perspective, I would actually move it a bit up, maybe something like this. And just imagine if we add a different set of images and change the whole the content and make it perfect, then it will look really epic. So if we play it, if we preview it, we see this happening, and now it's time for our last twist, which is kind of a twist. It's another page trigger. We don't add just the marquees. We can add maybe a rotate to the perspective, so it's already correct, and we set it to be 0, 0, 0. No duration. This is actually, we want this to be the initial state, and we duplicate it. This can happen with the marquee, or maybe we should separate this actually. Let's separate this animation we want to make for the perspective. We could do it either way, but I want to separate it so it's much easier for you to see. We want to rotate the whole background, the perspective that we want to make. How do we do it? We make an initial state. Actually, it doesn't have to, but we make it to so it's cleaner and you also understand it better. So we go from 0 in how many seconds? Maybe in 10 seconds. So today's animations are super long. We want to rotate it, but it does look a bit flat. I believe we need to add also self perspective. So here we can add children perspective or self perspective to it. And this works like a camera. If you've worked with a camera, you know this. The smaller it gets, the more distorted the image becomes. I'm just trying to make this on the fly, but maybe this is just too much distortion. Just a little bit is fine, right? So what happens now if we view it? Did we cancel the other animation? Yes, we need to add page load, maybe page finishes loading, play the marquee on a loop. So one is marquee and the other one is the perspective. So now we preview it. It animates and it also shifts the perspective. So it looks like now we have an infinite number of shows and movies on Netflix. It animates forever without breaking, and we have the perspective. So I think this was it. Now I'm reading the comments. I'm checking if people are asking any question about how we did the last part, but I believe we've been live for long enough, so I would just read some questions and ask for your opinion, and then we can call it a day. Oh, thank you, Righty. This is really nice of you saying that. Netflix is gonna steal that from you. I don't know. They probably did not do that for a good reason. It's going to make the site a bit heavier, even though if you use Netflix, you already have a good enough connection. So that's probably not a problem. Maybe they've done enough studies why they don't they don't show off more or make it that it looks like it's more shows there. But yeah, I don't know if it's smooth enough for you guys or not in the live show, but it's pretty smooth on my screen. And yeah, we can have a look at it again. When we play it, it changes the perspective, and we can even add more animations just to mention how powerful Webflow is. We can add a mouse move over element animation. So when the mouse moves over the elements, it changes the whole perspective. Again, so it's changing automatically, but we can also interfere with that and change another div block so that contains the whole thing. So just minds blown. How can I publish it though? Good question, and a good question for the ending. So just go to publish and then publish to the selected domain, and that's it. It's published on the select domain. All right. So all right, guys. This is pretty late, and I think we went through every question. Again, thank you so much for stepping by. This has been a lot of fun recreating the whole thing. We went through a lot, and I hope you learned something and had some fun. This video will be recorded and available for you to maybe later on go and do the whole thing step by step. Also, the Figma and the style guide, everything is in the link in the description. So thank you again for stepping by, and yeah, that's it. Thank you, and thanks Anna for monitoring the questions and adding them to the doc for me to answer them. Thank you so much. It's been great. Thank you, everybody. All right. Then that was it. Thank you and bye.